Welcome to another mini class, A Moment with Yourself with Linda Ty. We've been on a journey examining the fight, flight, freeze responses that we hold inside our bodies when we've experienced an event that causes for the nervous system to go into a sympathetic arousal response that it remembers. Yeah? And this week we'll look at the truncated attachment cry. So similar to the other survival defense responses, what can happen is our body stays on this loop tape. We go back to that which worked. So we go back to the fight response. We go back to the flight response. We go back to the freeze response. We go back to the collapse admit response. And similarly for some of us, we go to keeping small, keeping quiet, not having a voice even when we have so much to say. And for some of us, we also go into going back to that response over and over and over again, crying out for help. You know, when the safeness is there with a relationship, we then end up oversharing or talking a lot. And it can be this sense of, I want to be able to create this secure attachment and have you here, and yet it can be so hard to take it in that there's someone here. This material we'll actually look at in more detail in the next two classes of the series, where we look at being able to reach out, to grab, to pull towards, and to have. But just for today, we'll look at specifically this truncated attachment cry, which can either go on to loop tape, right, the recording that doesn't stop, and or it becomes inhibited. Yeah? And so I'll invite you to just place a hand on the heart and a hand on the belly, to breathe into the belly as well as to breathe into the upper chest. When we talk about this truncated attachment cry, it can actually bring up many of our child parts that didn't get to have a voice, or perhaps wanted to have a voice, and yet we knew that it wouldn't be productive for us at that point in time. And so this simple gesture here is a way of saying, I'm here with me. I can come home to myself and hold myself with some self-compassion and some tenderness as I sink into a sense of recognition and appreciation for this truncated attachment cry. We know from the world of neuroscience that when the amygdala alarm center of the brain begins to fire, Broca's area goes offline. And this is the part of the brain that's responsible for articulating through speech. It's the neuroscience explanation for why we go into that speechless terror. It's the silent scream over which becomes overlaid with thousands of silent screams through the rest of our lives. And so this sense of self-compassion, this my nervous system knew what to do somehow in order to survive the unspeakable. It knew to keep quiet. It knew to be small. It knew to make no sound whatsoever, because that was what was necessary back then. And what we know is that neurons that fire together wire together, and after they've wired together, they fire together. We become really good at what we practice. And so we go back to that which worked until we begin to recognize that we'd like to break out of this conditioned habit pattern that we've learned from a place of survival. And the beginning of that journey requires us to hold ourselves with a sense of gentleness and kindness and self-compassion, and an authentic appreciation. Yeah. And I think this also helps those of us who may not have this in our nervous systems, be able to work with others, to be around others for whom this has become part of their way of being in the world. Yeah? So the way that this can tend to manifest, I've talked about one of those ways, is I want to speak up but I can't. And when I do, it's so hard. Yeah? And so if we go back to this nervous system ladder that we've looked at over the past few weeks, you know, this sense of being numb or collapsed or shut down, I want to have a voice but I can't. And so when I begin to have a voice, I'll put this down so you can see what happens in my body. I'm like this. And so when I begin to have a voice, it's the child parts that are talking. It's this automatic submissiveness. And if I turn side on, you can begin to see, right, the truncated attachment cry. Right, it's collapsed, and yet I'm trying to tap into the relationship to regulate me. And this is how it can come out. Perhaps there's the possibility of eye contact, and perhaps there's not. And the body may express in this way. Mm-hmm. And then for some of us, we begin to have a voice and we're in the frantic, agitated, sympathetic activation of our ladder. And there's a phrase that we say in 12-step groups, to be able to mean what you say and say what you mean without saying it mean. Yeah? And so when I'm in sympathetic activation, I'm in fight, flight, freeze, right? Or I'm in fight or flight. So I tend to be like this, right? My head's a bit forward, my jaw's a bit tense, and I've got a voice, but notice how my voice comes out. And it's really hard to say what I mean and mean what I say without saying it mean. And I may not realise it, but other people may perhaps experience me as attacking them. Yeah. For some of us, it's that flight response or a freeze response. So notice what happens to my voice when I pull in my diaphragm and then I'm trying to communicate my needs. And it's notice what happens in your body when I'm pulling in my diaphragm, my voice goes up here. And my legs are tense and my lower body is tense and my core is tense and my shoulders are pinned in and my upper torso is pinned in. Yeah. And so then it actually becomes easier to not say anything at all, because underneath that, I notice for myself is a lot of emotion, a lot of tears that are stifled under there. And so to actually express what I'm feeling and be vulnerable and courageous while there's that fight, flight and freeze going on in my nervous system can actually cause for the whatever I need to say to come out, and then crying. And as we know, for trauma survivors, exposure equals death. And so it's easier to not say anything at all. And so we end up silencing ourselves, and then we leave the situation, and then we go through the coulda, woulda, shoulda, and we internalize that fight, flight, freeze. And I become the victimizer. I become the oppressor and the oppressed. And there becomes this ruminative spiral that is unproductive. Yeah? So the first key to all of this is to begin to recognize what happens in your body. Mm-hmm. And to also recognize the ways in which we may have developed ways in which to work through this, overcompensating perhaps, or perhaps having a flat affect altogether, where I'm not showing any emotion whatsoever, and there's no valence or tonicity or prosodity in my voice. The breath is shallow, but I'm not giving anything away. And we can also hold a space of self-compassion around the ways in which we have developed these strategies to help us get by in the world. Yeah. An animal in nature needs to keep quiet because exposure equals death. And so when we recognize ourselves moving down the ladder into sympathetic activation, we make a hum or a sigh with the exhale. Yeah. So you can experiment with this. Just take a breath in, exhale, And I invite you to make any sound that feels appropriate for you today with the exhale. It could actually be nose breath on the exhale, and I don't know if you could hear that through my computer audio, but it's almost like that ujjayi breath that we do in yoga classes where it's an audible exhale. Yeah. So it could be the audible exhale through the nose. It could be the sighing with the mouth open or the humming with the mouth closed. And you're also welcome to experiment with combining this with the orienting response, which we did in the first week, where if you happen to be next to a window, you can look outside the window and orient to something in the distance. To actually look and notice and take in the color of the sky wherever you are, and the shape of the clouds, and the shadows and the light that is in the clouds or in the sky, to notice the silhouette of the buildings or the trees in the distance, to allow the ocular nervous system to passively relax and to make some sound with the exhale. And if for you, part of the tension patterns in your body is the forward head, you can bring that back and then invite in a sense of curiosity, because curiosity is also the forward head. Yeah. And you can be curious about noticing the spaciousness between yourself and that which is in the distance of your field of vision with whatever is currently in your environment. And to allow the audible exhale to happen. Perhaps for some of you there may be the need for a double inhale. That's okay. Perhaps for some of you, you notice the tension patterns in the back of the neck, which then, may be a slow tension release of the muscle area in the shoulders and the neck. Whatever it is that feels appropriate for you. And to be able to take in through the eyes and the softness of the eyes. To take in through the fullness of the breath with the audible exhale. And to transform some of this sympathetic activation into curiosity through this softness of the eyes and the audible exhale. Allows for us to perhaps move up the ladder, the polyvagal ladder, and into curiosity and playfulness. The audible exhale. And you may wish to invite in, what does that sound like? This sound of curiosity. Ah. Mm. And check in. Notice what this has been like for you to experiment with shifting your position on the polyvagal ladder through the use of the audible exhale. Perhaps gentleness with the nose breath exhale, the sigh or the hum, as well as perhaps an audible expression of curiosity and delight. And this element of delight for me is the delineation between fright and delight. In yoga, we say that excitement is fear with the breath. Excitement is fear with the breath. So in terms of what is going on in the nervous system, it's the same, that fright and delight. Yeah? Except with delight, there's the breath. So you can experiment, if you like, with a fright breath in, which typically is that short, sharp breath in through the mouth. And with the exhale, make a sound, any sound, whatever feels natural for you, whether the mouth is open or closed. Perhaps there's a facial expression that just emerges, a little facial expression or a larger one, as you experiment with the open mouth exhale with the breath or the closed mouth exhale with the breath. And for those of you with little ones, you can also practice this with your little ones. This is something that you can notice and then practice. For some of us with the fright breath, it can be that opportunity to close the mouth and then do the double inhale into the belly. And then just a slow exhale with the mouth closed. And we can try this out. A fright breath in, close the mouth, breathe in the rest of the way through the nose into the belly. And then hum with the exhale. An extension of this is toning, making vowel sounds with the exhale. Ooh, ah, ee, ooh, ah, ee, ooh, oh. I like to be a little bit absurd. For me, absurdity is akin to playfulness, and it can move us up the ventral vagal ladder. And something to try on or to experiment, particularly if you move very quickly into the fight response, is you can sing about your madness. I'm mad, I'm mad. And that way we give our anger an expression, yeah? Because you are real, your feelings are real, your needs are real, and it's okay for you to take up space in this world. And we can do that in little moments just for ourselves. Mm. Another way to do this, which also taps into that truncated attachment cry, is to just simply sing about this present moment as it is. As I look around my room, the lights are on and I see colours and plants and shades of pastels, so bright and soft. And it feels inane and absurd, and yet it taps into play. It taps into this reciprocity with myself, where it's okay in this moment for me to attune to this present moment in a way that taps into ventral vagal rather than simply top-down cognitive. Name the 5 things I see. Name the 4 things I can smell. Name the 3 things I can touch. You know, that can be very top-down cognitive. And by being able to bring an element of play, there's a reciprocity, rhythmicity in here and now. And even if it's silently singing to yourself, silently humming, what happens is the breath begins to tune in with what's going on inside. Mm-hmm. Next week and the week after, we will play with some actions of attachment. In the meantime, be well, play, and the encouragement is to connect in small ways to your inner voice.